I was rinsing a glass at the sink when his phone lit up on the counter again. It had been happening more often that week. Not constantly, just enough to interrupt whatever we were doing. He was in the shower, water running steady, steam starting to fog the mirror. The phone vibrated once, then again, like whoever it was knew he would answer. I dried my hands and glanced at the screen without picking it up. Her name wasn't saved in a way that meant anything obvious. Just a first name, simple, neutral, easy to ignore if you weren't looking for something. I wasn't looking for anything. Not yet. I turned the phone face down and went back to rinsing the glass. By the time he came out, towel around his shoulders, I had already put it out of my mind. He picked up the phone, checked it quickly, and didn't say anything. That was the first time I noticed it, but at the time, it didn't feel like something important. Just a small shift. Something easy to explain. We didn't break all at once. We got comfortable, busy, predictable. I thought that meant stable. He thought it meant something was missing. Around that time, our routines had settled into something quiet. We ate dinner at home most nights, watched whatever series we had started, went to bed without much conversation. It wasn't bad. It was just steady. He still kissed me before leaving in the morning, still asked if I needed anything when he stopped by the store, still texted me during the day, just less. Not absent, just reduced. If I had to describe it then, I would have said nothing was wrong. Just a phase. People get busy. A few days after the phone started lighting up more often, I noticed he had begun smiling at it. Not openly, not in a way that would make you pause, but subtle. A slight shift in his expression, like something amused him more than it should have. I remember asking him once, casually, what was so funny? He said it was work. Someone at the office sent something stupid. I nodded and didn't ask more. At that point, there was no reason to. A week later, we were sitting across from each other at dinner. He had barely touched his food. His phone was next to his plate, screen facing up. It lit up again. He didn't pick it up immediately this time. He just glanced at it, then at me, then back at his plate. That was new. He used to answer things without hesitation. He never checked whether I was watching. I didn't say anything. I just continued eating. After a few seconds, he flipped the phone over and pushed it slightly away from himself, like he was trying to make a point of not looking at it. It felt intentional. That was when I started paying attention. Not in a suspicious way, more like noticing patterns. The next few days, I watched without making it obvious. He was on his phone more, but only at certain times. Late evenings, early mornings, moments when we weren't actively talking. He still acted normal with me. There were no sudden changes in behavior, no obvious signs of distance, but something underneath had shifted. It wasn't what he was doing. It was where his attention was going. Around that time, he started mentioning someone from work more often. Not directly connected to the messages, at least not in a way he made clear. Just small references. He said she had joined their team recently, that she was still learning how things worked, that she asked a lot of questions. He said it casually, like it didn't matter. I remember nodding, not thinking much of it. People talk about coworkers. A few days later, he mentioned her again, this time about staying late to help her with something. It still didn't feel like anything. If anything, it sounded like him. He liked being helpful. He liked being needed. That was something I had always known about him. He didn't say he was unhappy. He didn't say anything was missing. He just started finding that feeling somewhere else. About 2 weeks in, I noticed the first real shift. We were sitting on the couch, watching something neither of us was really paying attention to. His phone buzzed, and he picked it up immediately this time. He didn't turn away from me. He didn't hide it. But he leaned forward slightly, just enough to create space. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. I watched him for a moment, then looked back at the TV. A minute later, I asked him something about the show. He didn't answer. Not because he didn't hear me, because he was still typing. I repeated the question. He looked up, slightly distracted, and asked me to repeat it. I did. He answered, but it was brief. Half his attention was still on the phone. That had never happened before. Not like that. That night, after he fell asleep, I stayed awake a little longer than usual. I wasn't planning anything. I just thought. It wasn't one thing. It was a series of small things that didn't align anymore. The phone, the timing, the slight distance. None of it was enough to confront him, but together, it formed something I couldn't ignore. The next morning, everything was normal again. He made coffee, asked me what I wanted for breakfast, kissed me before leaving. If I had only seen that version of him, I wouldn't have questioned anything. But I had already started seeing both. Around that time, I realized something important. He wasn't hiding anything aggressively. He was just shifting, gradually, like he was convincing himself it wasn't a problem. A few days later, I saw her name again. This time, the phone was unlocked. He had stepped into the other room, leaving it on the table. A message came through. I didn't pick it up right away. I just looked at the notification. It wasn't long, just a sentence. Something about wishing he had stayed longer after work. That was the first moment it became clear. Not because of what it said, but because of how it was said. It wasn't professional. It wasn't casual. It was familiar. I picked up the phone then. I didn't scroll immediately. I just opened the conversation. The messages weren't explicit. No clear line crossed. Just gradual intimacy, inside jokes, small check-ins, updates about their day. It looked like something that had been building over time. I scrolled up slowly. There was a point where it shifted. Earlier messages were neutral, work-related. Then, over days, they became more frequent, more personal. He started asking about her day outside of work. She started telling him things that had nothing to do with their job. Then came late-night messages. Then came small compliments. Then came moments where he was clearly prioritizing that conversation over everything else, including me. I put the phone down before he came back. I didn't feel shocked. That was the strange part. It felt expected. Like everything I had been noticing had led to this. That night, I didn't say anything. I watched. I let things continue. Because at that point, I understood something he hadn't admitted yet. He didn't think he was cheating. Not yet. In his mind, it was still harmless. Nothing physical had happened. So it didn't count. But I could see where it was going. And I wanted to see how far he would let it go. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't confront him. I observed. He started staying later at work more often. He mentioned her more, but carefully, like he was balancing how much to say. He texted more when he was with me. He was present, but not fully, like part of him was always somewhere else. I noticed how he started justifying things in small ways. He said work had been more stressful. He said he needed a distraction. He said he was just helping someone adjust. None of those statements were lies on their own, but together, they built a narrative he could believe, one where he wasn't doing anything wrong. Around that time, I saw the messages become more direct. They started making plans outside of work. At first, it was framed as convenience, grabbing coffee before meetings, staying late to finish something. Then it shifted. They started choosing to spend time together, not because they had to, because they wanted to. That was when I decided I wasn't going to stop it. Not yet. If I confronted him then, he would deny it, or minimize it, or convince himself it wasn't real. I needed it to be undeniable, for him, for everyone else. A week later, I saw the first message that crossed the line clearly. It wasn't physical, but it was emotional in a way that couldn't be explained away. He told her something he hadn't told me, about feeling stuck, about needing something different. She responded in a way that made it clear she saw herself as that difference. I read it once, then I put the phone down. That was enough. From that point on, I started preparing. Not emotionally, logistically. I didn't change how I acted with him. I didn't pull away. I didn't confront. If anything, I stayed consistent because I didn't want to alert him. I just collected information, dates, messages, patterns. Not obsessively, just enough to understand the full timeline. It wasn't one moment, it was a progression. A few days later, we were invited to a small gathering. Friends, some coworkers, people who knew him well, people who saw him as reliable, stable, good. He liked being seen that way. I remember him mentioning earlier that week that she might be there. He said it casually, like it didn't matter. I nodded. That night, I got ready slowly. There was no urgency. I already knew what I was going to do. When we arrived, everything felt normal. Conversations, music, people moving around. I saw her across the room. She looked exactly like I expected. Not in a negative way, just someone who had been given attention and responded to it. Nothing more complicated than that. He greeted people like he always did, confident, easy. At some point, we all ended up in the same space, close enough to talk. That was when I started. Not with accusations, with clarity. I mentioned, casually, that it was interesting how work friendships could evolve, how people sometimes didn't realize when boundaries shifted. The conversation stayed light. People nodded, agreed. Then I added specifics, not aggressively, just factually. I said I had noticed how late-night messages had become more frequent, how conversations had moved from work to personal, how time together had shifted from necessary to chosen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at him the entire time. I just spoke. Someone asked what I meant. I explained, step by step, timeline, progression, how it started, how it developed, how it became something neither of them had acknowledged openly. The room got quieter. He tried to interrupt once. I kept going, not over him, just without stopping, because there was nothing to argue with. Everything I said was observable, verifiable. He didn't deny it. He couldn't, because I wasn't accusing him of a single moment. I was describing a process, and everyone could see it, even him. I remember finally looking at him when I finished. He didn't look angry. He looked exposed, like something he hadn't fully admitted to himself had been laid out in front of him. No one defended him, not because they were against him, but because there was nothing to defend. He had become exactly what he thought he wasn't, not in one mistake, but in a series of choices. I didn't stay long after that. I didn't need to. I said goodbye normally. No scene, no final words, just done. That night, I went home alone. The apartment felt the same. Nothing had changed physically, but everything was different. He came back later. I remember hearing the door open, then close softly. He stood in the hallway for a while before coming into the living room. I didn't ask where he had been. I didn't need to. He started explaining, not defensively, more like he was trying to understand it himself. He said it hadn't meant anything at first, that it just happened, that he didn't realize how far it had gone. I listened, not because I needed answers, but because I wanted to hear how he framed it. He wasn't lying. That was the thing. He genuinely believed it had been gradual, that there wasn't a clear point where he chose it. But there had been, many times. He just hadn't recognized them as decisions. When he finished, I told him I understood, and I did. Then I told him I was leaving. Not immediately, but soon. There was no urgency, no anger, just conclusion. The next few days were quiet. We moved around each other carefully. No arguments, no tension, just distance. I packed slowly, sorted things out, closed that part of my life in a way that made sense. He didn't try to stop me. I think by then, he understood, not just what he had done, but how it had happened, and that it couldn't be undone. On my last day there, I stood in the doorway for a moment before leaving, not to reflect, just to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything. Then I walked out, no hesitation, no second thoughts, because by that point, everything had already been processed. It didn't happen in one mistake, so I didn't end it in one moment either.